That's right. KOPN Columbia, 89.5 FM. My name is Mike Hagan. You're listening to Radio Orbit. I'll be back in just a few minutes.
My love, but I can't give you my heart. And you, yeah, you give your heart as though it were art. Find myself on 9th Street and call up in the middle of the night.
About that. Good evening, everybody, whoever you are, wherever you might be, whenever you might be listening to this program. Welcome to the program. It is Radio Orbit, and it is Monday, the 22nd of October, 2018. Real quick, let's say thanks to the guys and girls that started things off today and set everything up for us as they do every Monday. Woody gets things going from 3 to 5 p.m. with the Real Deal Country Show. If you like country music, tune into Woody every 3 to 5 p.m. on Mondays, and you'll hear some great classic country. Ameripolitan is what Woody likes to play, and Western swing, Woody does a great show, 3 to 5 p.m. every Monday. After that, you got Left Ahead Radio, talking politics. Tech Radio after that, 6 o'clock, keeping us up to snuff with the remarkable world of technology. Jazz plus blues equals Dolphins and whales. And then New Wave Radio Theater just finishing up a couple minutes ago. So good music, good talk, good news coming to you every Monday and every day of the week, actually, on KOPN 89.5 FM. Also streaming on the web live at kopn.org. Okay. All right, my name is Mike Hagan, and this is Radio Orbit. Last time I was with you was 2 weeks ago. We do this program every 2 weeks. Eventually, we'll do it every week, hopefully. We're just working out some time slot stuff between different hosts and different times of the day and night. But eventually, I'd like to do it every week. We got plenty of material to do this every week. But right now, we're doing it every other week. And last time I was with you, we had Lynn Ulbricht, the mother of Ross Ulbricht. We talked about the story of the Silk Road and Dread Pirate Roberts and the Cloak and Dagger intrigue that was actually a real life story and an ongoing one. What a tale, really. Whatever the truth is about Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road and the Bitcoin connection and all that stuff, like so many things, I'm not sure. I'm not sure of much except that I don't know. I don't know what the truth is. I'm certain that I haven't been told it by the powers that be. I feel closer to the truth certainly with the conversation that I had with Ms. Ulbricht. But it's real tough these days because you're getting a lot of different information from all kinds of different angles, and everybody's telling you that they're telling the truth. So anyway, if you missed it, you can listen online anytime from the archives. Just go to www.mikehagan, MikeHagan, and you can find that on the web. And you can go to the archives page, and all the programs that I do are posted up there just in simple MP3 format, and you can just download it or listen to it right from the site. I'm working on the podcast thing. It's funny because somebody back in the day when I used to do this radio program, I had a lot of people that helped me out with the technology side. And believe it or not, this program is on iTunes. All of my shows up until like the middle of 2006 are actually up on iTunes, and if you just do a podcast search for Radio Orbit, you'll find all these programs that I did like 13 years ago. The problem is that the person who did that I have no idea who they are or who they were. So anyway, somebody did the technology side of getting my stuff podcast, but I didn't do it, and it's been 12 years, and the person who did it, if you're out there, I'd sure love to talk to you and have you keep doing it, but if nothing else, give me the username and the password, because right now I've got a whole bunch of my material that's up on iTunes and a whole bunch of other places that I can't access because I'm not the one that did it. I mean, this is in the early days of podcasting, sort of. And so anyway, my old stuff is out there, and hopefully the new stuff will be out there pretty soon. I've just got to get a rope around this whole podcasting business, okay? All right, so anyway, like I said, if anybody's out there and you want to lend a hand on the technology side, my website is, 13 years old as well, and actually not quite, it's like 11. But, at the time, it was like really cool. like sort of cutting edge, right? But now it's like lame, and the best I can do is get the new shows up there so they're in the archives, and you can listen to them, but as far as the user interface and just the look of the thing, it looks old. So anyway, bear with me on that, okay? And if you're a kind-hearted technological enthusiast and you've got some ambition and some energy to help out somebody, get a hold of me. You can do that through mikehagan.com. That's one thing you can do at the website. You can still listen to the programs, and you can still send me an email. All right, it's not too hard to do that. Okay, and you can follow me on Instagram. See, now I'm getting hip. All right, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter, which I know Twitter's sort of lame these days, and I don't do Facebook, although I hate to say it. I had a personal Facebook account or membership from the early days, like 2009 until like 2012, and then I got out before everybody else got in, to be honest. And anyway, because of the usefulness of it with regard to spreading information, like when your radio show is on and who is the guest, and if you want to sort of stream it live and all that stuff, you can do a lot of stuff with it. So even though I hate to admit it, I may actually get a Facebook account, at least for the radio show, and try to utilize that. If you can't beat them, join them, and maybe we can bring it down from the inside, right? That's my philosophy, at least. Okay. Anyway, in the meantime, before I do any of that, just go to Mike Hagan, HAGAN.com, and you can, like I said, you can listen to the old shows, and the one that we're doing tonight will be up there, probably sometime tomorrow, okay? Okay. Now, speaking of the show that we did a couple of weeks ago, if you weren't able to hear that show, not only did you miss a pretty interesting conversation with Lynn Ulbricht, but you also missed the friggin' fantastic music of Ray Fitzgerald. If you're not familiar, she's a local young woman here in Columbia, Missouri, and her music is stunning. I played a bunch of songs from her record that's called Popular Songs for Wholesome Families, and it's an absolute masterpiece. And it was produced right here in Columbia with a lot of local people, recorded down at Will Reeves' place, along with another studio, maybe not in town, if I remember correctly. But at any rate, what a record. And new music coming up hopefully very soon from Ray Fitzgerald and her band. And just kudos to everybody that was a part of that project. I mean, I got to tell you, if you have Spotify or if you have Bandcamp, everybody can just go to Bandcamp and look up Ray, R-A-E, Ray Fitzgerald, and listen to some of this young lady's music. It's just fantastic, and I'm thrilled to have sort of discovered her on my own here, and I hope to have her on my early Friday morning show. I do a show on Friday mornings that's called Open Mic Radio, and it's a much more lighthearted program than this one, and I basically just invite local regional musicians into the studio, and they come and they bring their tools and they play songs and they talk and we have fun. So anyway, Ray Fitzgerald, hopefully sometime soon on Open Mic Radio. I know she has a new project that she's working on that's has more of a rock and roll edge to it. So anyway, it should be great, and I can't wait to hear it. All right. For tonight, I'm very pleased to say that I have Dr. Michael Hyson live from the Sirius Institute in Puna, Hawaii. Actually, I doubt if Michael's actually in Puna tonight, because they've had a tremendous amount of trouble over the last few months. If you remember, there was a lot of talk in the news a couple of months ago about volcanic activity and major lava flows that were happening in the southern part of the Big Island. And that's right where Michael, my guest tonight, Dr. Michael Hyson, where he lives and where he works. Anyway, so he's a remarkable guy and just amazing. And I'll have him with me in about 45 minutes here. And we're going to talk about dolphins and whales, and we'll talk a little bit about his background, of course. We'll talk about communication, about intelligence in general, and even space travel. And you might say, how do those things go together? Space travel and dolphins? What? How do those things go together, you ask? Well, we'll talk to Michael Hyson, and they actually do have a pretty interesting relationship. So that's coming up at the top of the hour here. Dr. Michael Hyson, marine biologist. He's also, the guy's just a remarkable dude. I'm not going to go too much into it, right? So you hear him in about 45 minutes if you're interested in those types of animals, and if you're not, maybe you should be. They're super cool. All right. Also, Tonight, speaking of music, the music of Andrew Ryan. Andrew Ryan is a St. Louis-based producer, sort of turned performer, musician, and we're going to hear a bunch of songs tonight from his freshman effort called Across Currents. It was released about a year ago, September, October, I think, 2007, and we heard a song called 9th Street that started the show off, and even though Andrew's from St. Louis, I'm on 9th Street pretty much right now, and I have great memories and current world experiences that are always pleasant, or most of the time, on 9th Street, right down here in Columbia, Missouri. And the radio station that I'm broadcasting from is 915 East Broadway, which is essentially on the corner of 9th and Broadway, a little bit in between 9th and 10th, I guess. But anyway, that was a song called 9th Street from Andrew Ryan, and we'll hear more from Andrew as we get into the show here. All right, I think we'll probably do a song right now, as a matter of fact, and let me get my act together, and then we'll come back and we'll do space weather, and we'll talk about Timothy Leary, Pablo Picasso, and my friend Star Newland. Star was a very close associate and partner of Dr. Hyson, who will be on the program in just a little while here. And she passed away in 2013. And I just want to say a couple things about Star. And in fact, I'm sure Michael will have something to say about her as well. And she was a guest on the program back in 2006, 2007, 2008, and really miss her. And so we'll take a little time to say thanks and hello and goodbye to the people who have been with us and no longer are. All right? Okay, once again, you're listening to Radio Orbit on KOPN Columbia, 89.5 FM. And this is Andrew Ryan from his record called Cross Currents. Pardon me, it's called Across Currents. And this one is called Ain't It Obvious?
Been torn apart. Ain't it obvious? Ain't it obvious? It's not the town we're from, or the road we're on. Obvious.
right, that's another one from Andrew Ryan. I like it. Good stuff there from Andrew, coming from St. Louis. And he's got a record called Across Currents, and you might check it out. Available out there probably on Spotify and wherever else, but just do a web search if you're looking for Andrew Ryan. And as always, you can go to my website and you can link to the musicians that I feature on the program as well. So Andrew will be up there in the music archives sometime tomorrow. But for now, it's andrewryan.net. And really great stuff coming from this young man from St. Louis, okay? We'll hear more from Andrew throughout the rest of the program tonight, okay? Now, so it is time, though, for space weather. Let's talk about what is happening in the skies above our heads, okay? It is Monday, October 22nd. If you're an asteroid hunter, you have a great opportunity tonight and the next couple nights probably to spot Vesta, which is, they actually call it like a minor planet, but I consider it an asteroid. But it will be visible against the backdrop of Sagittarius over the next couple nights. On both tonight and tomorrow, you'll find Vesta just a little bit north of Sigma Sagittarii, which is the northernmost star in the handle of Sagittarius, sort of teapot. And if you have strong binoculars or a telescope, you'll be able to see that big rock flying back there against the background of Sagittarius tonight, tomorrow, right? As a matter of fact, tomorrow, Uranus, not Minus, but Uranus will be at opposition tomorrow night. Opposition really, what that means is on the opposite side of the sun from us. So tomorrow, officially at around 9 o'clock Eastern time, the outer planet Uranus will be absolutely 180 degrees opposite of the Earth. And that means it'll rise at sunset, and it'll get real high in the sky around 1 o'clock in the morning, and then it'll set at sunrise. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you can check that out tonight and tomorrow. On Wednesday, we have the full moon, officially Wednesday night, and it's actually quite beautiful tonight. Get a nice evening, and I don't know, maybe 55, 60 degrees, but just a lovely night out there, and you can go out and look at the stars and see the moon. A couple nights it'll be full, all right? What else? The solar wind, moving pretty quickly, actually. For those who pay attention to this, 330.4 kilometers per second. How about that? For information that nobody really cares about, but I actually am interested in the sun. I have been for many years, and the reason I'm interested in the sun is because it is 99.9% of the mass and energy of our entire solar system. So if the sun has a hiccup, the whole system is affected by it. And I think we tend to forget about the awesome power and magnitude of the significance that the sun plays in our lives. We think we just run everything these days. The monkeys think they run the show, and they probably think they could turn the sun off if they wanted to. But the bottom line is the sun runs the show here, and it is the boss of this local neighborhood. And so if you are interested in the sun, you will know that there is a funky shaped hole in the sun's atmosphere right now, and there's a high stream of solar wind coming from that hole right toward the Earth. And if you live up in the higher latitudes, you might see some real nice auroras over the next few days here. You'll have a bright full moon on October 24th, and that'll probably just add to any of the beauty that you see up there in the sky. All right. So again, the way you stay grounded is to realize that it's a real big place that we're spinning around in here, and there's a whole lot of other things going on other than us. Okay. All right, that's about all I have to say about that. Near-Earth asteroids. Anything else going on that's going to get close to us? There's some real cool imagery if you go to the website here. I'm at spaceweather.com, and they do a nice job of sort of giving a synopsis of sort of the things that are happening in the next week or two, and they do some really neat visual depictions of sort of the the world that we live in, outside of the world that we live on. And if you look at the intersection of what they call near Earth asteroids, these are basically asteroids that are going to come really close to our planet, within a few distances of the moon. The moon is about 250,000 miles away from us, which in cosmic terms is just very, very short distance, not very far at all. 250,000 miles. If you have an asteroid that comes within the distance of the moon, or inside that diameter, that's getting pretty close. And there are a lot of asteroids and big rocks that do that pretty often. I think more often than people might realize. And there's a group of people that actually track these things, and they try to identify them, and then they try to work out their orbits, and then they know when they're going to come back again if they are. And they call them NEAs, or near Earth asteroids. And as of October 23rd, which is right about now, there have been 1,936 potentially hazardous asteroids that have been discovered. All right, these are the ones that have been discovered, and we actually know what their orbits are, and we have named them. They all have names, and they're all sort of cataloged now. Right now, the interesting thing is that there could be a new one added to the list tomorrow, or tonight, for that matter, at any given time, because they're just discovered when they're discovered. So we have really no idea how many asteroids and comets, frankly, and meteors, and whatever the nomenclature might be. We really don't know how many of them there may be that are swinging around and flying here and there that may eventually come very close to our planet, or even impact the planet. But every time they do discover one, they make a note of it, and then they give it a name, and then they get all proud because they say, okay, we just spotted that one, and now we know all about that, and it'll be back on October 18th next year, or something like that. Of course, the problem is that for every time you discover a new one, you didn't know about it until you discovered it. And if it happens to be on a course that's a little bit more dangerous, well, you're going to discover it not on a flyby, but you're going to discover it when it actually hits. And, that hasn't happened in significant fashion for a long time. Many, many moons, many millions of moons, actually. But, you never know. So I guess the biggest event in our sort of modern times was the Tunguska event. This is in eastern Russia in 1904, 1908, something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, early 1900s, definitely in the first decade of the 1900s, there was a meteor that the scientists guess exploded before it actually hit the ground. It was what they call an air burst. So a big rock that was moving so fast entered the atmosphere, and before it actually hit the ground, it exploded above the ground in above an area called Tunguska in what was the former Soviet Union, and it leveled thousands of acres of forest. And it's a remarkable historical event, actually. One of these days, I should try to find somebody who actually knows a lot about Tunguska and get him on the show. But the story is that if you lived in Europe, you could actually see the glow of the Tunguska event for weeks after it happened. And this is from 1,000 miles away. So, and this is a minor event. It had very little effect on human activity as a whole. I mean, I guess if you lived around that area in the early 1900s, you probably wish that you hadn't. But at any rate, it didn't really affect, global, the global trajectory, I guess. However, it's an indication that these things can still happen, and they happen more frequently in the past, but they can still happen, and they've happened around the solar system during my life. There have been some interesting impacts that have actually been witnessed almost in real time on the planet of Jupiter in particular. Jupiter's had some remarkable impacts that have happened in the last 40 years that have actually been filmed and watched via telescope by people. And if that's not a wake-up call, I'm not sure what is. Now, as a caveat, one of the reasons why Jupiter gets whacked more often, in fact, Jupiter is sort of like a guardian out there. Jupiter is the fifth planet out from the sun. It goes Mercury, then Venus, then us, and then Mars, and then Jupiter. But Jupiter's a monster planet, super big, and with a very, very strong gravitational pull. So many of the objects that enter our solar system from wherever, they get dragged into Jupiter's gravity well before they enter the inner solar system, which is where we are. The way they sort of divide it, there is actually an area in between Mars and Jupiter. It's called the asteroid belt. And the most obvious explanation is that there was a planet there at some time in the past and it was destroyed. And now it's just a band of rocks. But the scientists, astrophysicists, these types of people, they define the solar system as the inner solar system, which is on the inside of the asteroid belt, and then the outer solar system, which is, outside of that. That's Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. But at any rate, Jupiter swings around out there, and because it is such a big object and because it has a much stronger gravitational pull than anything else around there, it actually attracts a lot of the things that are coming in that might otherwise, cause trouble for the planets that are on the inner part of the solar system. So anyway, a very interesting situation that we all live in, and we all tend to get caught up on what's going on right here on the Earth, and I tend to, obviously I got to live in that too, but I'm also interested in the things that are happening outside of our planet because it's all one big thing, it's like a clock. It's crazy. I mean, it's like the most sophisticated clock of all time because everything is spinning around everything else in different amplitude with different frequency, but it's all a part of the same thing. Everything is a part of the same thing, and everything is spinning around something else that was spinning around something else that was spinning around something else. And at some point, regardless of whether it's the Big Bang or some sort of a omnipotent being saying, let there be light, it's still started from one thing, and it can't be disconnected. So that's the world and the universe that we live in, and it's really a remarkable place. It's a freaking unbelievable thing that we're even here to even talk about it, and I'm constantly blown away by our own existence, even though I'm an older guy now, and it used to blow me away as a young guy, and now it blows me away as an old guy. All right, anyway, it's Mike. You're listening to Radio Orbit on KOPN Columbia, 89.5 FM. We're going to hear another one from Andrew Ryan. We're kind of working my way through this record. I'm not going to play them all right in a row, but the first few I might, just to get a feel for it. And then we'll make our way into the deeper parts of this record. But anyway, great stuff from Andrew coming from St. Louis, and we'll hear some more of his music starting now and throughout the rest of the program tonight, okay? This one is called Caladiums, and I don't even know what that means, but I like the name of the song. It's Mike. You're listening to Radio Orbit on KOPN Columbia.
was left were scattered pictures and memories. And I surely remember how I felt when the rain came down on me. All I could think of is you, but all I could care for was me. Caladium soon will be in bloom once the river reaches the bank. And all I could think of is you, but all I could care for was me. And all I could think of was you. And the rain came down on me. Think of is you, but all I could care for was me. Caladium soon will be in bloom once the river reaches the bank.
Wow, another really nice one there from Andrew Ryan. That one's called Caladiums. I guess it's a flower. I guess I didn't listen close enough the first time I heard the song. All right, great stuff. Andrew Ryan. We'll hear more from Andrew throughout the program, and you can find information about Andrew Ryan on the web at andrewryan.net. That's Ryan, R-Y-A-N, all right, andrewryan.net. Okay, it's Mike. You're listening to Radio Orbit on KOPN Columbia, 89.5 FM. Let me take care of a little bit of business here, and I'll be back in just a minute. All right, it's Mike, and you're listening to Radio Orbit, KOPN Columbia. All right, it is about 20 minutes before midnight on Monday, the 22nd of October. Let's do a little bit of, I was going to say we'll do the news, but I should do my little memorial piece here, just remembering a couple people that were important to me. I mentioned earlier there's a woman whose name was Star Newland, and I won't say too much about Star because I'm sure me and Michael will talk about her a little bit when we get Dr. Hyson on the air here at the top of the hour. But she was a wonderful person, and someone who was actually on the radio program here maybe 11, 12 years ago, and I miss her, and she did a lot of great work and really was a muse of sorts and an inspiration for Dr. Hyson for many, many years. So Star Newland passed on July the 13th, 2013, and we'll talk a little bit about Star in a little while here, okay? Also, Pablo Picasso. I can't do much for Pablo Picasso on the radio, but I can certainly say that, you know, he was one of the most important figures in the 20th century in terms of art and art movements. I don't know, he's a Spanish fella, right? And had just such an impact on the art world. Tons of fans that are still around today. And he was prolific, you know. I mean, had 20,000 plus paintings, drawings, sculptures, all kinds of stuff. And really just, I don't think there's anybody in the art world that doesn't, you know, recognize Pablo Picasso as one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. So if you're not familiar, there's a great documentary that was done years ago, and I forget the guy who did it. It's called The Miracle of Picasso, I think. I'm going to look real fast. Hold on. Bear with me. The Miracle of Picasso. I don't want to give the wrong name if that's... No, I don't think that's what it was. Oh, no, I'm remembering The Mystery of Picasso. That's what it was. The Mystery of Picasso. And it's a video that was taken of Pablo Picasso with a French journalist. There was I forget his name, but there was a French journalist, a reporter, who was super interested in Pablo Picasso's work. But Picasso didn't like anybody to... he didn't like interviews, and he really didn't like to talk to the media or anything like that. But eventually this guy befriended him to the point where Picasso agreed to do a video documentary with him. And now this is in the day of real film, right? Before digital photography and all that. So what he did was astonishing. And if you're interested in it, you can check out The Mystery of Picasso. But I'll tell you just really quickly the way that they did this. Picasso's big problem was that he didn't want to be filmed from behind, and he realized that if he was painting and the people wanted to watch him paint, that you obviously had to be behind him, or at least on the side to a certain extent, to see what he was doing. And he was not interested in doing that whatsoever. He just didn't want a camera behind him at all. Eventually, him and this journalist, I wish I remember the reporter's name, but they came up with a plan to have him paint on glass. And so they were able to put the camera on the other side of him. So you're at the beginning of the painting, you're looking at Pablo Picasso through a piece of glass. The camera's on the other side, and then you begin to see him paint, and the paint covers the glass in reverse image, from the camera. But it is a stunning work, actually, and one of the most amazing documentaries I've ever seen. In fact, one of the things that actually got me really interested in Picasso years ago. So anyway, a wonderful person and a great artist and a huge influence on the art world, and even, just architecture and mindset of people, I think. Art has a much bigger impact on the average citizen than you think. It's some sort of something that you get by osmosis or something like that, and it does have an effect, and it is worthwhile, I think. And certainly the work of Pablo Picasso, in my opinion, is worthwhile. Okay, it's Mike, and you're listening to Radio Orbit, KOPN Columbia. I'm going to play a piece here by Timothy Leary that I dragged up from the gutters. And it's from 1962 or 63, when he was still at the Millbrook House. And for those unfamiliar, Timothy Leary was one of the, if not the youngest professor to ever teach at Harvard University. He was one of them, PhD at 23 years old, born October 22nd, as a matter of fact. That's why we're talking about him today. Born October 22nd, 1920. He was born in Massachusetts, and he was an American psychologist. He was an author. He was an advocate for the use of psychoactive drugs such as LSD, psilocybin. He performed some of the earliest clinical studies with LSD and with psilocybin in the early 60s, long before the U.S. government made all that stuff illegal. Anyway, extremely influential man, and very intelligent and interesting. He was the son of an Army officer. He went to West Point and had a doctorate in psychology from California, Berkeley. So his story is a remarkable one. He began experimenting with psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, and eventually he became very close friends with a guy whose name was Alpert. Was it Richard? Yeah, Richard Alpert, who is also known as Ram Dass. But those two, between the two of them, they scared the hell out of everybody in the U.S. government, and eventually Leary ended up in jail, escaped from Leavenworth, and had a remarkable story for the rest of his life. Eventually became a little bit more accepted in culture, but for a long time was just considered among the worst people, out there. My opinion of him is quite different. I think he was a genius, and I think he really shared a lot of things that were helpful to a lot of people, and probably still can be, if people can kind of get their heads around what he was trying to say. So before everything got real ugly and all the propaganda networks became employed and changed the history, this is the kind of thing that was being talked about in the 1960s. All right, so this is from 1962, Dr. Timothy Leary. It's Mike, you're listening to Radio Orbit, KOPN Columbia.
Dr. Leary, LSD has made you either a prophet or a pariah. What fashion would you use, or how would you summarize your own experiences with the drug? What has it done to you, to your mind?
First of all, we have to ask the question, what is LSD? LSD is a chemical, but it's not a drug. Most Americans are familiar with two drugs which change consciousness. Drugs which put us into a stupor, drugs which wake us up. Almost every American uses one of these two. We use opiates or tranquilizers or alcohol to put us into a nice, cozy stupor. Or we use drugs like pep pills or even coffee to wake us up. But there are many other levels of consciousness, many other levels of awareness which can be triggered off by chemicals. Now, LSD is not a drug like alcohol or barbiturate. LSD is a chemical which contains several hundred Encyclopedia Britannicas. So when you talk to someone who's taken LSD, or if you ever seen anyone who's taken LSD, his consciousness is being spun through many, many different levels of language, which are not the language of English or French or of Latin, but chemical languages of cell and nervous system, sense organ, which are many millions of years old. What's the reaction to taking LSD? If the person is unprepared and he swallows this local library of chemical messages, he's confused. He can be entranced and delighted, or he can be very frightened. Most of the people who develop what we call an LSD panic are people who take LSD not knowing what's going to happen. They think it's like a martini, or they think it's like a pep pill. It's not at all. It's a highly complicated engaging of nerve tissue and cell tissue within inside, which throws you into energy languages for which many people are not prepared, thus the confusion and the fear.
Who would you recommend take it?
Well, again, when we're talking about LSD, we're talking about an instrument, like the microscope, a form of energy. I think that any responsible adult who has demonstrated through training that he knows enough to use this form of energy should be allowed to do it. I am not in favor of indiscriminate use of LSD or of any form of energy. I think the motor car in the hands of an alcoholic or of a nut is a very dangerous instrument. Anything that man's technology has created can be dangerous if an unprepared person gets it. I'm in favor of strict licensing by government agencies, the way the automobile and the airplane is licensed, so that psychologically and physically prepared people who know what they're doing and who have serious purposes can use these wonderful and incredible keys to the wisdom and energy which is inside our body.
What kind of wisdom can such a person find for himself under the influence of the chemical?
Well, I have to use the example of the microscope. 300 years ago, if I were to say, do you know that there's a level of energy around us which is invisible, but which is powerful and beautiful and has all sorts of meanings, you'd think I was a nut or a pariah, and I'd be lucky to stay out of jail as I am today. The same thing is true of LSD. LSD is like a microscope, even an electron microscope, which opens up awareness of energies which are there. There's nothing miraculous or mysterious about LSD. It opens up energies which are there, and I think will be used in the future as a form of education, as a form of self-growth. In any situation where we now use our symbolic mind, the microscope of LSD will help us see more, see faster, and see deeper.
What therapeutic value, if any, could LSD have?
You mean in psychiatry?
In psychiatry, in clinical psychology.
Well, naturally, the psychologists and psychiatrists want to use LSD in treating mental illness. I think that LSD will be the number one cure for mental illness when the psychologists know how to use it, because it's a microscope, and unless you know how to use the microscope and know what to put under it and how to describe and communicate what you found, the microscope leads to confusion. But when psychologists know how to use LSD, I think it will be extremely beneficial in understanding and treating mental illness. But it's not mainly a psychiatric tool. It's a tool of education. It's a tool for every person who is responsible enough to use it to open up his consciousness. Because the problems that man faces today of learning, of mental illness, of emotional maturity, no government agency or no profession can solve these problems for you. I've got to do it for myself, you've got to do it for yourself, and all the viewers have got to do it for themselves. And keys like LSD must be used for self-administration by trained people.
LSD is not simply, as you say, a joy drug or a joy chemical.
Not at all.
But there seems to be quite a group of people who are taking it for kick, for self-indulged use of LSD throughout our civilization, could noticeably improve man's relationship with his environment and with himself?
I am completely convinced of that. And I'm not just speculating. You see, LSD is here to stay. 1 million doses are being used in the United States today, and the nature of LSD is that one user converts in his enthusiasm 2 or 3 others, so there'll be 3 or 4 million people using LSD in the next 2 or 3 years. These forms of energy are here to stay, like the microscope and like atomic energy. You can't pass laws against them. And I'm convinced that the use of chemicals which open up the mind and put us in touch with our ancient wisdom which is inside are going to lead man to be more harmonious with other men. We're going to learn to be more harmonious with the other forms of energy, plant and vegetable and air and animal around us. I do think that LSD and other drugs which are coming along, even more powerful in their effects to open up the mind, are going to dramatically change man's way of life. It makes us think that the world comes in little sentences and straight lines. It's only a few hundred years old, and man's cells and man's sense organs and man's chemicals, which come from his own body and from outside, have been the sources of information for millions of years before the printing press and radio and television came along.
What kind of caution would you, as LSD's leading prophet, offer to those who might be tempted to take it not in the proper conditions or without the proper control or fully knowing what they were going about?
The only thing to fear from any form of energy is ignorance. It's the ignorant person who causes damage and destruction to himself and to others. We're in the same position now with LSD that we were 70 years ago with the automobile. Here's a new and powerful form of energy which is going to change our way of life.
All right, there you have it. Timothy Leary from about 55 years ago. Still a very powerful message and one that still resonates with me for sure. All right, it's Mike. You're listening to KOP on Columbia 89.5 FM. It's Radio Orbit, and we're going to play another song here by Andrew Ryan. This one is called Fire. And when we come back at the top of the hour, we will have Dr. Michael Hyson, Marine Biologist, and we'll talk about dolphins and whales and space travel and all kinds of cool stuff, all right? So stick around. That's coming up in just about 5 minutes. Once again, it's Mike. You're listening to Radio Orbit, KOPN Columbia, 89.5 FM, and this is Fire from Andrew Ryan.
Tell anyone I've got some things I cannot say. There's a fire tonight inside of my chest. It won't go away. It will not go away. go away. It will not go away. No matter how hard I try, I'm always coming up short. Won't go away. It will not go away.
You're listening to Radio Orbit with Mike Hagan on KOPN 89.5 FM.
That's right. This is Radio Orbit on KOPN Columbia 89.5 FM. My name is Mike Hagan, and my guest tonight is Dr. Michael Hyson. He is a microbiologist, a marine biologist, a remarkable man who has a great history. He's worked for people like Bell Labs, worked for NASA, done all kinds of things over the years, and I've had the pleasure of knowing him for quite a few of them. So I'm not going to do a real long intro here. I'm going to let Mike do a little bit of his own stuff here and get right to it and say hello, Dr. Michael Hyson. Hi, Michael.
Aloha.
Aloha. How are you?
All right. Doing good.
We are talking to Dr. Hyson from the big island of Hawaii. I was going to say Puna, but before we talk about that, are you back in Puna, Michael?
Yes. We're in a place called Kalapana Seaview Estate. And that's right along what they call the Red Road, 137.
Is the Red Road have something to do? Does that have something to do with the lava flow?
Sort of. It was called the Red Road for other reasons, but the lava flow is about 6 miles to the northeast of us. It's running as a lava river for months.
Yeah, I was mentioning earlier in the program that Puna, where you're located, was essentially ground zero for all of the volcanic activity that was happening a few months ago, and I'm sure is still happening to a certain extent. And I know it's not that uncommon there. They, in the mainland here, they played that off like it was, an Armageddon scene. And I know for the people that are actually in the path, it certainly is a very difficult situation. But
sure.
But is it more? How common is something like that, Mike?
This was extraordinary. It was apparently there was more flow out of this particular set of vents than all the Pu'o flows, all the main crater flows for decades.
So it was significant. It wasn't completely overblown, huh?
Right.
All right.
It is true, though, that the Puna area that was directly affected was rather small, whereas I think the news reports tended to act like the entire island was in danger or something like that.
Yeah, I think people tend to forget how big the Earth really is, even though it's relatively small. It's still very big, and there's a whole lot of ocean and a whole lot of landmass. And
but we did end up displacing about 700 houses. We lost quite a lot. We lost the Green Lake Mountain, and the Hot Pond, what we call the Hot Pond, vacation land, Kapoho, Pohiki. I was living in Pohiki. We ended up moving 3 times in 10 days.
Yeah, I know. I know. We were talking when that was going on, and you were just moving and moving and moving. Yeah.
So fortunately, we're stable again, and then so I'd like to encourage everybody to come visit us. The tourist input has been down lately. It would help everybody if everybody came and visited. It's wonderful things to see here.
I've still got that on my bucket list. I can't believe I haven't been out to see it yet, but I'm still going to do it, and I hope other people will do it too. It'd be fun to get a trip together, to just get as many people as we could to come out there and visit you guys.
Right. It's kind of funny in the sense that here I was like 6 miles from a lava river, but they had it all cordoned off by police and National Guard and all that. So hardly anybody got to see it, actually. I mean, you could see the films. People got films. But directly, we hardly saw anything. Big red skies at night, that sort of thing. Clouds of fog in the day.
Yeah, some of the photos and videos that were coming out from there were actually pretty stunning.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that you're stabled up, or that things have stabilized, and you're in a safe place, and things have calmed down. I know that was really rough there for a minute. So, all right. Yeah. So Michael, for the listeners, it's been a long time since you've been on the air with me. For people who are unfamiliar, maybe a little bit of background. I'll tell them that we were both born in the same town, which is really to me still just cracks me up. Rockford, Illinois, up in Winnebago County in northern Illinois. We're both from the same hometown, but other than that, people don't, well, I mean, that's all they know at this point, but tell them a little bit more about yourself and how you got into dolphins and whales and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, as Michael says, we were born in the same town, Rockford, and I was raised about 8 miles away, mostly in a little town called Winnebago. And we had a small family farm, about 7 acres. My father was trying to make a sustainable everything way back then. We had cows and pigs and chickens and dogs and cats and lizards and hawks and owls and foxes and ravens and, well, not ravens, but crows. And a whole bunch of things like that. And so I grew up with that kind of thing. And my father was also a microbiologist and did histology and postmortems and tissue work and all kinds of things. So I kind of osmosed a lot of biology. So I was interested in birds and falconry, and we had some falcons and so on. So at some point I got interested in bat sonar. And so I learned how to cave to go get some bats out of caves. So I had some pet bats for a while. I was going to fly them through.
Like as a pet? Like as pets?
Yeah. They lived in a little cage. I'd hang them on my finger and feed them mealworms and give them water. And I had 2 guys that were called pipistrel bats, and I had another one that lasted longer called the, what do they call it, the big brown bat. And he would just hang on my finger and eat about 20 mealworms and then take about a eyedropper full of water and then go into hibernation for a while, and I'd hang him back up in his cage and so on. So I was going to fly him around and put up wires for him to dodge while he was flying, like they did in the sonar experiments.
Yeah.
So I tried that, but I got a room in the high school. But it so happens, much to my amazement, these guys can go through 1/4-inch cracks. And he found a crack that could get out of the room in about 10 seconds and took off through the ventilator shaft. And I never saw him again personally, but he crawled out in an English class, and the English teacher smashed him with a book. So that was my poor bat.
Oh, all in the name of science.
Yeah. So I tried my best with that, but it came to kind of a bad end. But in the process of all this, I was looking around for, biological sonar and things like that. And ran into a book called Porpoises and Sonar by Winthrop Kellogg. And then, which is, tells the story of how they figured out that they were able to do sonar in the first place. Like why were the dolphins able to dodge nets at night, for example?
Right.
Nobody knew. So anyway, Kellogg worked that out pretty much with the Navy. And then I went looking for more books about dolphins because they were fascinating, and ran into John Lilly's book called Man and Dolphins.
Oh, yeah.
In which he details the quality of their brain and how it's bigger than ours and equally complex, and how they had very complex vocalizations, and they probably have language and so on. By the end of the book, they're teaching English to the dolphins. And so they'd have Peter, for example. Margaret Howe was working on him, and Margaret would say, "Peter, 1, 2, 3, 4," and Peter would go, something like that.
Tell people a little bit more about John Lilly, because he was such an important figure, and I'm not sure that many of my listeners are actually familiar with who he was. Right.
Well, John Lilly was definitely one of a kind. Associate of his that I worked with later, named Hank Truby, said that John was the most certificated man he ever met. That he had licenses to do, say, ham radio, pilot license, sailing, scuba. He was a computer programmer. He was a biophysicist. He graduated out of Caltech. He became an MD, a psychiatrist. He was interested in robotics and cybernetics and all that sort of thing. And some people called him a walking syllabus of Western civilization.
He was a remarkable guy. I still have... There's one that's called The Center of the Cyclone, I think, that he wrote.
Right.
And he has another one called The Scientist. There's a whole bunch of them, but his
the autobiography of scientist is really good.
Oh my gosh! So, yeah, for folks out there, just so you know that we're talking about a really significant character here in scientific history, and especially with regard to dolphins. Right.
People may be most familiar with John for having invented what they call the float tanks, or the isolation tanks.
Yeah.
He worked with tanks like that or similar things at National Institutes of Health for about 10 years, and then he got infamous and controversial because even though somewhere in his career they decided to explore LSD, and he had done 10 years of baseline work in the float tanks without any drugs or anything at all, and finally decided he could do the LSD because he had enough baseline data. And he ended up writing a book called Programming and Metaprogramming the Human Biocomputer, which got to be an underground classic. So 10 years or 12 years after he did the work, when it was all legal and under government auspices, Leary and Alpert caused a lot of stir about LSD, and the government decided to label John Lilly public enemy number 3.
Yeah, behind those
Leary,
two guys,
Alpert,
right?
and Lilly.
Right.
Yeah, but all the work that Lilly did had been under proper conditions in, legal and everything. So I thought that was rather unfair, but that's what happened.
Right.
So, but before that, all came about. He had he was doing a lot of floating, and he was at lunch one day at National Institutes of Health and said he was looking around for species that floated a lot. And somebody said, well, dolphins float a lot.
Right.
And somehow I just never thought of that before. So anyway, he was on the next plane to St. Augustine, Florida, and he set up a deal where he was going to look at the brains with electrodes and things like that. And so something like 50 dolphins died in total, with all that work, which is bad, I'm sure. But John was very apologetic about that later. Like, they asked him, what did you do? He says, back then I ran a vivisecting camp for my friends. But to be fair, he was a neurophysiologist. He was looking for what he could do with large brains. The dolphins had brains equal to humans or better. And I think he initially thought, here's a subject I can do without human subject committees getting in the way, blah, blah.
Yeah,
and that's how
I understand.
started.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, for example, one of the reasons they lost so many is he found out they were conscious breathers, which was brand new. Nobody knew that before. So if you knock a human out, you'll keep breathing. If you knock a dolphin out, they'll stop breathing, because every breath is a conscious act. So they lost several dolphins, like they'd give them anesthetic and they'd die. So they thought, well, maybe they're allergic to the anesthetic. Maybe we gave them too much. So they'd cut back on the dose. They'd change the anesthetic, and they kept dying.
I'll be darned.
And finally, they figured out, they're conscious breathers. They have to be. Because every time their blowhole goes above the water, have to have conscious control, or you'd suck in water and drown.
Yeah.
So that means they're the other implication of that is they're awake 24 hours a day with at least half their brain.
Why don't you talk about that? I know sleep has something to do with the bicameral nature, or the fact that half of their brain is asleep and half their brain awake at all times.
Exactly. Yeah, so they're either awake with both hemispheres, or they're awake with one hemisphere. So the hemisphere that's asleep will go through a 45 to 90 minute dream cycle, while the other one's awake, and then they'll switch and go through, and the other one will go through the dream cycle, and that's how they work. And they're able to control the whole body with one half of the brain, and that's what they're doing all the time. So that means they're always awake. They're never totally asleep.
Are they still moving? Are they still swimming? And
they're still swimming.
Relatively active or whatever when they're asleep.
Yes, there are times when they are quiet. At least in captivity, we called it clogging. It would sort of lay there on the surface like a log for a while. The ones I watched in Texas would come up to the surface, take a leisurely breath, and then maybe sink down about 4 feet, stay there for about 5 minutes, come back up and breathe again. And they'd do that for a few hours.
Interesting.
And then, but if I wiggled my hand in the water at all, just wiggle my hand a little bit, boom, they were wide awake, came over and like, what's the game? What do you want to play? Ready to go.
Amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, having read Lily's book, my brother was looking for a job for the summer, and he got offered a dolphin training in Texas, and he was going to turn it down. So I showed him Lily's book. Said, "Look, they're teaching him English, Bob. You got to do this if you got the chance." So he did. So I got to go down when the summer vacation happened. I got to go down and hang out with him for most of the summer. So I was with about 5 dolphins when I was 13, 14 for a whole summer, and of course I was sucked.
Right.
They're such marvelous creatures. They're very loving and affectionate and humorous and intelligent and all those sort of things. And it was so much fun to swim with them and be around them. I really liked it. So I ended up at University of Miami, and I had sort of goals of becoming a ethologist, a biologist that watches animals in the wild. Yeah. So that was my goal at the time. Everybody said I should study enzymes. That field biology was dead, and no, I don't really care that much about enzymes. I want to play with real animals.
Right.
So anyway, I ended up getting 3 degrees out of the University of Miami, and the first one was like pre-med, and second one was a master's was on stereo vision, and third one was a computer model of the retina of the eye. That was my PhD. And in between, I'd go see the dolphins at the Miami Seaquarium. So I got to be pretty good friends with an orca named Hugo and some of the other dolphins there. So, and then, let's see, just to wrap this up a little bit, I was working on my master's in 1973. I ran into Hank Truby, T-R-U-B-Y.
Truby, yeah.
Truby. And he turned out to be the linguist that had been doing the language work with Lily and the dolphins. So I got to hang out with him and his family for years and learned everything I could about what Lily was up to. So I'm kind of a direct inheritor of the Lily tradition.
Well, I think we'll have to talk more about what that tradition actually is about, and what and what the goals were, and maybe still are, huh?
Yeah, I think the goals are still there, and the data supports it. Basically, the Greeks, for example, thought that the dolphins were the highest form of physical creation. And if you could kill a human, it was bad. But if you killed a dolphin, you were considered cursed by the gods.
Well, I know it was the death penalty if you killed a dolphin in ancient Greece,
right.
certainly.
That's right. And the oracle at Delphi, which is sacred to Apollo in the form of a dolphin, more or less ran Greece for about 2,000 years. So they were very much dolphin-related. And I think everything the ancients knew about the dolphins is what Lilly rediscovered. But somehow the Western civilization lost it about 300 BC, so about 1960 when Lilly picked up the ball again. Basically, I think we're, I like to call us co-species. We are used to cooperating, and we have been doing it for years, like cooperative fishing. Harkening back to the Greeks a moment, there's a story in Pliny the Elder about how the dolphins helped the Greek fishermen fish.
Yeah,
and they've come back from the day of fishing, and the dolphins are collecting fish from the dock. And one of the Greek fishermen goes down to the dock and feeds the dolphins bread soaked in wine.
Huh.
And that's stuck in my head for years. Like, what the heck? Because our dolphins never wanted anything except good sushi. Why would they be interested in wine and bread? So
right.
So it turns out years later, I read a book called The Road to Eleusis. Russell Himes and Albert Hoffman was one of the authors, and I think Gordon Wasson was one of the authors.
Yes.
And anyway, so they found out the Eleusinian mysteries had to do with feeding people a drink called the kykeon that was extracted from Claviceps purpurea, which was a purple claviceps that grew on barley and wheat.
Which is a type of mushroom, right?
Yeah, it's a type of mushroom, right?
Yeah.
So it turns out, basically, you had LSD-like amides in this drink. And as the sort of culmination of these 2 weeks of celebration, they would get people high on this kykeon and then take them down into a cave with some good lighting and special effects. And they had a plague of some sort going on with Demeter, the grain goddess, and so on. So people actually got to, in a sense, talk to their gods and trip out on all this stuff. And then they were sworn to secrecy about what happened. But at the end of that, they could wear what they called a purple-edged robe, because they were now an initiate. So it was considered reasonable for a Greek to have at least one initiation at Eleusis in their life. So people like Aristotle, Plato, Sophocles, everybody you've ever heard of in the Greek world went through those ceremonies.
Like a rite of passage or something like that.
Yeah, rite of passage, yeah. So it turns out that if you remember when you read the Iliad and the Odyssey, the guys are always diluting the wine and passing it around.
Yes.
And when I read that, I thought, well, they just don't have enough wine. I said, no.
Huh.
It turns out Greek wine was so laced with psychedelics and poison that if you drank it straight, it would kill you.
Well.
So they would dilute the wine and praise the wine by how much they could dilute it and still get everybody high.
Huh.
So that's why the Greek fisherman is feeding the dolphins bread soaked in wine. They're sharing their most sacred sacraments with the dolphins.
Wow. I know there's some artwork really old. I know I've looked a little bit into dolphins in mythology because of some of the things that you've taught me over the years, right? And and before we talked, I pulled out an old book of mine, and there's an old I guess it's a drawing that's carved into rock. This is in Norway, and apparently this one is more than 4,000 years old, and it shows a man in a boat, apparently hunting a seal with two dolphins on either side of him.
I'll be darned.
Yeah,
wow.
and then there's another one here that this book talks about that says one of the earliest and better known of these is the dolphin fresco on the wall of the Queen's Room in the Minoan Palace of Knossos on the island of Crete, which was painted by an unknown artist about 3,500 years ago. That's one you're familiar with, huh?
Yes. Oh, yeah. The Queen's Chamber is really famous.
Wow. So
got a ring of dolphins on.
Incredible. So clearly a remarkable long-term history of a relationship between humans and these creatures.
Yes. And there's also the Greek stories of cooperative fishing and the legends of the boy on the dolphin, about the boys that befriend a dolphin, and then the dolphin takes them to school.
Right,
and
right.
Yeah, and things like that, yeah. There was something like a dolphin that came to one of the coastal cities, and thousands of people came to see it, things like that. So all this was known to the Greeks way back then. We've had modern ones like that, like Polaris Pete and Opa Oni in New Zealand, and now we've got dolphins like Fungi and Johnny and Jojo, and they're solitary dolphins that come in and hang out with us.
Well, what do you mean? Explain a little bit more about that. You mean dolphins that have sort of separated themselves from their pods or whatever and just sort of come and hang out with humans?
Yes. Like there was one guy named Horace Dobbs worked with one called Donald off of UK. Then currently there's a dolphin named Fungi that's off Ireland. And let's see, there's another one called Donnie, I think it was, in France. There's a friend of mine, Dean Burnell, who has a multi-decade relationship with a similar dolphin called Jojo that lives in the Turks and Caicos, and so on. So there's a history of solitary dolphins coming in and hanging out with humans.
And what sort of relationship do they have? I mean, is it how close do they get?
Oh, they come right up, and sometimes they'll give kids spin rides, and they'll come right up and rub against people and being very affectionate, let themselves be stroked, and so on.
What about in terms of relationship closeness? I mean, do they become close, like heart close? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Dean and JoJo is probably the best example. They're really close. They're telepathic with each other. They've been friends for years. JoJo got run over by propellers, for example, and Dean saved his life and took him to the vet and got antibiotic cream into his wounds and things like that. So they've had a really deep, significant relationship, yes. Along those lines, my friend Rose Farrington, who may or may not be with us, I've lost touch with her for a year or so, but she was one of the major founders of early Greenpeace. She helped shut down a shore whaling station in Sydney, Australia, years ago. But anyway, she lived with an Aboriginal tribe for 2 years, where the dolphins were complete equals with the rest of the people in the tribe. They swam together and hung out together and fished together, and everybody was very affectionate with one another. And so I asked her where. She said, I won't tell you.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
It's too sacred.
I understand.
I could screw it up. That's the kind of thing I think the Greeks had going with the dolphins, and what maybe a lot of indigenous people had. Oh, another one, my colleague Star Newland.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Right. You want to do Star for a minute?
Yeah, in fact, we got to take a break here in about 4 or 5 minutes, and I was going to say when you were going to take a breath, I was going to say before we go to break, let's please talk a little bit about Star. And for the people who aren't familiar with her, she was a real special person, and someone who I know was super influential in your life, and really had a great relationship with the Dolphins as well. So maybe a little bit about Star Newland, and then we'll take a little bit of a break here in a minute.
Okay. Well, jumping ahead in the story a little bit, I went from University of Miami to Caltech, and then when I was working at Jet Propulsion Labs, we can talk about that a little later. And I went to John Lilly's 75th birthday party in Malibu on January 6, 1990.
That's awesome.
And met a lady named Star Newland and her son Ariel, who were just wonderful people. And she happened to be staying at John's at the time, working on an underwater birth video with dolphins and underwater birth and all these things. And the stuff she was writing in her journals were just like the kind of things I was thinking about what we should do with the dolphins and babies, and education and language interfaces and musical interfaces and things like that. So we basically partnered up to do what she called the Sirius Institute, which Jerry had organized. So I became their official research director, and we ended up going to Hawaii together and worked together for on the order of 25 years until she passed away in 2013.
Yes.
And so I'm still missing it, but that's a quick rundown on Star. Yeah, so one of the stories she told me, she got to interview Chief Joseph of the Lummi people. They're part of the Northwest Coast Indians.
Yes. Famous.
And famous, yes. So it turns out when Chief Joseph was 4, his father knew his spirit animal was the orca. So he took him out at age 4 in a canoe out into the black of night off the shore. The orcas came up the canoe, and the father put Joseph over the side and let him go. The orcas took care of him all night and brought him back the next morning.
My gosh.
So other native tribes have had very close relationships.
Stunning,
Right.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, that's a place to take a break, I think, okay?
Okay.
All right, everybody, it's Mike Hagan. You're listening to Radio Orbit on KOPN Columbia. My guest is Dr. Michael Hyson. He's a marine biologist, among many other talented professions, and he's with us for another hour and a half or so, and we're talking about dolphins. Well, hey, Michael, when I was talking earlier, I was mentioning that we're also going to talk about space travel, and people are always like, what? Dolphins, whales, and space travel? Well, where's the connection? And I said, well, there is one. Trust me, there is one, right?
Of course.
So that's just sort of a teaser, but when we come back in a little while, we'll talk a little bit about some of the modern stuff, okay?
Okay.
All right. Once again, Radio Orbit, KOPN Columbia, and it's about 12:30 now. I guess it's Tuesday, the 23rd of October, and we're going to hear one from Andrew Ryan here, and this one is called Lake Effect. It's from his record called Across Currents. We've heard a number of songs from this album earlier in the program, and we're going to hear a number more for the rest of the show. This one is called Lake Effect. Once again, Andrew Ryan on KOPN Columbia, Radio Orbit.
Sorrow, still it lingers. To all those left around, now a man can easily get so lost out here. Lake effect has got me thinking, what am I doing here? You're an open book that reads. Pay close attention to me. If I've ever been myself, last night wasn't it? Oh, the rain keeps falling in my feet. Just another day, just another day, just another day out in the rain. And the wind blows me away from the people I meet. Especially shipyards lay at sea of North refineries. Now a man can easily get so lost out here. Lake effect has got me thinking, what am I doing? You're an open book that reads. Pay close attention to me. If I've ever been myself, last night wasn't it? Oh, the rain keeps falling in my feet. Just another day out in the rain. Yeah, the wind blows me away from the people I need. Especially
All right, another nice one there from Andrew Ryan. It's Mike. You're listening to Radio Orbit on KOPN Columbia. That one's called Lake Effect. And we're listening to songs tonight from Andrew Ryan's relatively recently released record. It's called Across Currents. It's about a year old. And he's a performer, musician, and a producer from St. Louis. And I ran across him a few months ago on Instagram, of all things, and am impressed and enjoy his music, so I thought I would share it with you guys tonight. All right, hope you're enjoying it. If you like that, check him out on andrewryan.net. Okay, and if you were interested in what you're hearing on this program in general, you can check me out at Mike Hagan, MikeHagan.com, and all the programs that we do in the past are up there in the archives, including a link to all of the musicians that appear on the program. So if you're enjoying it, go there and share it with your friends, okay? All right, it's about 11 now. Why do I keep saying that? I guess I don't have my glasses on, but it's about 20 minutes before 1 o'clock now on Tuesday, October the 23rd. And I have Dr. Michael Hyson, Marine Biologist extraordinaire, on the telephone with me here. And I'm thrilled to have him back on the phone with me and back on the radio. Michael, we did, I don't know how many shows we did back in the early 2000s, but we covered.
Feels like about 5 or 6. Right?
Oh, man, I tell you, we had
Elizabeth. We had Elizabeth, too.
You know, I was going to ask, how's Dr. Rauscher doing?
She's doing well. She's in Apache Junction, doing well. She'd probably be available for a talk if you'd like. I'll ask you. She had a good time the last ones we did.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do it. In fact, I sent her an email about, I don't know, just a couple days before I talked to you on Sunday, and I mentioned, you know, I'd sure like to have a chance to talk again. So hopefully we can work something out with Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, who's another just a phenomenal person and has done just an incredible body of work over the years. So
just a quick summary on Elizabeth. She taught herself relativity when she was like 15. And people have called her the Lady Einstein, and I think that's apt. I think she's probably brighter than Einstein ever was. She knows engineering as well as theoretical stuff, plus math, and she's expert in things I never even heard of. She's got like 250 publications and 5 patents and 5 books and like that. And she's well worth looking up. She's on the net, Elizabeth Rauscher, Rauscher. Rauscher, and I had the great good fortune of meeting and working with her. We've co-authored each other's papers, and I've had just hours of wonderful discussions. with Elizabeth, and she's just a marvelous human being on top of everything else.
Yeah,
So-
I agree. She's something else. And if you'd like to hear her and Michael on the radio, there is a program that's in my archives. It's probably from like 2006 or 2007, where we had a nice long conversation, and it was extremely interesting, if I remember right. So we'll try to do that again, Michael.
Yeah. In particular, just real quick, she's got a new book out called Mind Dynamics in Space and Time. It's about 600 pages on things like remote viewing.
Wow.
She was in on the original Stanford test of remote viewing and Uri Geller and all that.
Yeah. I know she was a professor at Stanford for years, or not?
Lawrence Berkeley Lab.
Okay, at Lawrence, which is even more impressive.
Yeah.
Well, it's a strange history and a strange world, and you know, it's funny because you and I haven't talked we've still been friends off the air, but we haven't done radio for 10 years. But the things that we were talking about back then are as relevant today as they were then.
Yeah, I think so.
You know,
I think things change more slowly than I would like.
Boy, isn't that the truth? Yeah. Well, okay, so with regard to like current work and papers and stuff, I want to mention the paper that you co-authored that you sent to me. You actually sent it to me a couple months ago, but you resent it today, and it has to do with echolocation and some very interesting observations that came from some experiments that you guys did.
Yeah.
Could you first describe what echolocation is, and also maybe just sensing in general? I think that people probably don't realize how different other creatures are. In other words, humans are essentially visual creatures, and dolphins certainly are not. Maybe you could talk a little bit about sensing in general, and then talk about echolocation.
Sure. So let's see. I guess animals have different specializations. So as Michael mentions, we're visual animals primarily. We trust our eyes and do a lot with that. And we have rather poor noses, whereas a dog has an excellent nose, so he's more of a nose creature.
Right.
And then we're very precise with vision. And the dolphins, while they have quite good vision, are primarily sonic guys. They listen, so they put out pulses of sound, which bounce off objects basically. And they listen for the echoes and then analyze that. And with that, they're able to map their environment even when it's dark, and catch fish and things like that. And we were talking about the bats before. Mm-hmm. The bats also are sonar. They call it sonar, sound orientation and ranging sonar. And the bats do the similar thing to the dolphins. So a bat, for example, can be diving through the branches of a tree in full darkness and pick up 2 fruit flies in half a second while dodging all the branches. They're really remarkable. And the dolphins can do things somewhat like that. I mean, they're just extremely precise in what they do. Their precision always blew me away. They just are so excellent at all that. But anyway, their sonar is quite complex. It turns out in the dolphin's case, they have at least 4 sound generators. So each dolphin can make 4 separate sounds, all different simultaneously. You might think of one dolphin as being a quartet.
And do you mean that they do it from 4 different parts of their body, 4 different sort of biological things?
There's 4 sound-generating areas that are sometimes called phonators, just below the blowhole, just behind the melon, on the tracheal line to the lungs. Mm-hmm. There's 4. What would you call them? They're kind of like vocal cords. There's restrictions in the line, and you pump air past these restrictions, and they squeak, or they click, or they whistle.
Right.
And the dolphin has extreme control of these. It can change the position of these 4 phonators. Basically, there's 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and they can be used in a stereo mode, like the top 2, the bottom 2, or the all left ones, all right ones. They do different combinations. And they put out sounds that are anything from a click to a whistle to a weird kind of blatting sound, or all sorts of things that they can do. And these sounds are the ones that bounce off objects in their environment, and they're able to interpret the echoes to navigate or catch fish or whatever. But in addition to that, they're able to put out extremely loud sounds. So, for example, my friend Buzz was trying to teach a dolphin to put his nose an inch lower than where he was. So he decided he would just mildly touch him with a 2x4, just to say go down. So he lowered the 2x4 in front of the melon, and as soon as it touched near the melon, the water turned into a white foam. The 2x4 kicked out of the water, and he said it felt like a shivered axe all the way to his shoulder. And when he looked at the 2x4, it was cracked in half.
I'll be darned. Go ahead. Michael, isn't there evidence of that in the wild as well? I think that organ that you mentioned that's called the melon, isn't that able to generate some sort of a loud sonic burst, but don't they even do electromagnetic bursts of some sort?
Oh, well, that's another whole aspect. First of all, the melon, as far as I know, the melon doesn't put out its own sound, but it does intercept. I mean, it's in the the acoustic path.
So it's like a lens or something.
Yeah, and it's generally considered an acoustic lens that collimates and directs the sonic signals coming from these sound generators or phonators. And the phonators obviously can be cranked up to very high power and crack 2x4s. So it makes shockwaves. And people like Ken Norris were trying to prove that the dolphins fished this way. And he did a number of experiments trying to get them to use this sonic pulsing, but he never quite got it on tape or anything. So I think it's one of these things, we know they do it, but it's been very difficult to show, because you got to get them to do it in a tank if it's too loud.
Right.
Ken Norris put them in a sea pen so they could aim outward toward the rest of the open ocean, but they still wouldn't do it for him. But anyway, he was looking. And so let's see where we're... Oh, right. So the melon... as you bring up, that's what you'd call the forehead anybody would usually call the forehead of a dolphin. Right below that is about a quart of stuff called valproic acid. It's a piezoelectric oil, of all things. So it's
a fluid of some sort.
Yeah.
Or a viscous fluid.
Liquid, viscous fluid, right.
Yeah, okay.
And somehow it's piezoelectric, which means like a quartz crystal, if you inject a charge into the quartz crystal will bend. Or if you bend the quartz crystal, it'll create a charge difference.
Yeah.
And it's most commonly known or used as like the phonograph needle. The quartz crystal, vibrated by the groove in the record, changes the charge on the crystal, which you detect and amplify, and that's the sound. That becomes the sound. So piezoelectricity is quite common and used all over the place. There's piezoelectric speakers in smoke alarms, for example. So the point is that in this case, in this context, the melon itself is piezoelectric, which means when the dolphin stimulates it with a sound, it actually puts out an electric current.
Incredible.
And it's hard to say. People like Eldon Bird did some measurements on it. I estimate roughly, and it's only an estimate and really just a good guess, that if the melon has a pumping efficiency of 10%, then maybe a dolphin could put out about 100 watts of electric power, maybe more.
Hey, Mike. And Michael, how common is that in the biological world? Are there other animals that exhibit the same sort of phenomena?
Well, there's about 60% of our own tissues are piezoelectric.
Okay.
Most importantly, things like bone. That's how the bone forms itself, because it responds to the current and the charge differences. So if a bone is stressed, it creates a charge, and the osteocytes that make bone are attracted to the charge. So if you bend a bone, the osteocytes will make more bone there to make it stronger.
Right.
So they're self-sculpting. And they use the piezoelectric effect to do that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. But I think, by and large, the dolphins and whales are unique, because they said something like 80% of their tissues were piezoelectric. Not just in the melon. There were other things, like some of the muscles, and of course the collagen and the skeleton. They're all piezoelectric. But the idea that the melon is piezoelectric is only known a little bit. I learned it through Eldenbird and a guy named Dean Rawlings. I'm not sure there's anything written up on it, but I talked to him personally about it.
Very interesting. All right, so back to echolocation and
echolocation.
your most recent paper. What was and there was sort of an astounding discovery. I thought it was extremely interesting. So but before we get to the top of the hour, let's talk about that.
Okay. Well, so just to summarize, the dolphin can put out 4 different sounds simultaneously that are all different. Mm-hmm. And part of that will come back, part of that will be projected onto, say, an object or a fish in the water, and echoes will arise that come back through the ears and the jaw of the dolphin, and they're picked up and processed, so that the dolphin can get an image of a sort, an acoustic image, if you will, of what kind of fish is out there, what it's made of. Right. They can tell, for example, the difference between copper and brass. Can echolocate on a BB about 70 feet away, and things like that. So they're very precise.
Just as a side note, how do they actually do the experiment to define how accurate they really are? Like the fact that how do the scientists like you know that they can actually echolocate something as small as a BB from X distance away?
Oh, they have them. They drop the BB in the water, and the dolphin orients to it and sends out a pulse to echolocate it. And up to 70 feet, they'll do it, and beyond 70 feet, they don't see it. So it's lost. It's lost beyond 70 feet. But closer than 70 feet, they see it. Sense it, anyway, I should say.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Okay.
Then they put wires and other barriers, and showed that they could swim through these mazes without touching anything in total darkness.
Amazing.
That's another thing they've done. They put suction cups over the eyes, so there's no visual input, and showing they can still navigate quite well, etc. And as I say, they can even tell what kind of fish it is up to a point, whether it's got a swim bladder or doesn't, whether it's different. What blew me away was things like the difference between copper and brass. They can distinguish that just from the acoustics.
And again, from a scientific standpoint, what kind of an experiment do you do to prove that?
Well, say you make the copper target the positive one, so if they detect copper, they get fed. So then you put a piece of copper in one box and a piece of brass in another box, and have the dolphin echolocate, and they'll point at the copper one and get fed.
That's awesome. Oh, my God. Incredible.
Right. And they also do this. They also use all this stuff for communication. Like Lily made a telephone so that there were 2 dolphins in separate tanks, and they each had a switch. So the switch of one tank would allow the dolphin to listen to the other dolphin. So if they both held their buttons down, they could hear each other. They held the buttons down 23 hours out of 24 and conversed.
Wow.
So, and there's Russian work, especially by Markov and Osterkaya, that say they have a complex language. That's kind of a long discussion, but I think they do.
Well, I think we got a little time after the top of the hour to talk a little bit more about language and communication. I mean, I think it's sort of key to our whole discussion. And as a matter of fact, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that one of the things that Starr told me back in the day was that John Lilly and his close associates thought that the language problem could be worked out primarily if you just raised human babies alongside of dolphin young, and that the language problem would actually work out itself. Yes,
that was the conjecture. We've gotten some distance to that, which we can cover. But you wanted to cover the echolocation paper, right?
Yeah, and if you'd like to give a shout out to your co-authors of that paper, I'm not sure who you were involved with in that, but it was really interesting.
The 3 main authors are Jack Kazowitz, who's at speakdolphin.com.
Yes.
Marvelous guy. A guy named John Stewart Reed, who had a thing called a cymoscope, which is a vibrating puddle of water, basically. And then myself, I was one of the co-authors. I think I'm the second author. And I'm not sure. There may be I haven't seen it for a while, so there may be some other authors, but those are the main ones.
Okay.
So briefly, what happened went something like this. they made some shapes, like, for example, a plus shape or a cross shape made out of PVC pipe. They had a cube made of closed-cell foam, 4 inches on the side. So they had a plastic flower pot. And what they did is they held this in front of the dolphin. The dolphin came up maybe a foot away and echolocated it, maybe with a click train, they call it. Something like, They record that click train. And then John Stuart Reed came up with this thing called a cymoscope, which is basically a puddle of water, about a millimeter thick, rather small, on the order of an inch across, and it's sitting on top of a big speaker driving coil, like the kind of thing you'd use for a big subwoofer. Okay?
Okay, all right.
So you take the echolocation sound of the dolphin, this you feed it to the cymoscope, which amplifies it and vibrates the puddle of water.
So it projects it on the puddle of water, okay.
Yeah, it vibrates the puddle of water. Now, ordinarily, you get these mandala-like radially symmetric patterns.
Right.
That's the common thing, and you can see this. It's in a, they call the whole field cymatics, cymatics.
Yes.
And you may have seen it where you throw sand on a plate, bow the plate, and the sand goes into interesting patterns.
Yeah, even like when an earthquake happens, similar things go.
Right. So things like that have been done all over the place. So in this case, though, much to our surprise, when they played the echolocation of the cube, for example, to the cymoscope, the shape of the cube showed up in the puddle of water.
Oh my gosh!
Similarly, with the flower pot and the cross,
incredible,
and Jim McDonough, man underwater. There's a humanoid shape in the cymoscope puddle.
Yeah, and
so that's it.
Yeah, it's actually quite stunning, and if you go to Planet Puna, and that's a good time to give out the website, Mike. If you go to planetpuna.com and scroll down a little bit, you'll see a press release and a link that goes over to dolphinspeak.com, and there they actually have a picture of that image right off the cymoscope, and you can also link to the paper that is called, I had it written down, Michael, but it has something to do with an interesting observation that was discovered.
A phenomenon discovered with echolocation, I think.
There you go, yeah. A phenomenon discovered using echolocation of dolphins. And so basically what we're saying is that we're basically seeing what they're sort of seeing through...
Well, that's jumping a couple logical steps.
Okay, so guide me through where we're at then.
Okay, well, all we can say is these shapes must be in the water. These sonic shapes must also be in the water. We can also show that a naive dolphin played the sound of the echolocation of the cube, and then given a choice of like 7 or 8 objects, we'll go get the cube. So that means whatever information describes cube, in this case, is in the echolocation sounds, and they can be interpreted by other dolphins to go retrieve the cube. So they know it's a cube. Even though we have no idea how this is happening. That's the key point. We don't know why. That's why we went through the trouble of doing this thing. Here we go. I've got the...
It's called the Journal of Marine Science, Research and Development, and the article is called A Phenomenon Discovered While Imaging Dolphin Echolocation Sounds.
There you go.
And the authors are Dr. Hyson, who we're on the phone with, Jack Kasowitz, John Reed, and Regina Barrera.
Right, Regina. I forgot Regina. Sorry.
Yeah. But anyway, this is a peer-reviewed journal and a very thorough study of an interesting phenomenon that now actually leads to more questions, apparently, right?
Yes, indeed. We talked to one of the best topologists on the planet, a guy named Lou Kaufman, and he said he thought we were like 20 years from a theory that would explain what's going on. Meanwhile, we have a wonderful friend named John Kraker, K-R-O-K-E-R, and he's done a lot of stuff on like speech recognition by computer. He's an excellent guy, and he's been doing his best to analyze this thing. And it's a little bit like having a holograph without knowing where the reference beam is, that kind of thing.
Right.
And we've been trying all kinds of things. We think we're getting somewhere. So we're starting a second paper on some aspects. But the fundamental thing is, how does a single-dimensional thing, like a samples of sound intensity versus time, because that's all the audio signal is. What is the mechanism by which that can create a three-dimensional
image
shape
in the water?
So we have no good idea yet. We can just show that it's happening.
I'm going to let our listeners sort of dwell on that for a minute, okay? We've got to take a break here at the top of the hour, but
okay.
Everybody, let your own melon think about that one for a minute. And we'll be back with Dr. Michael Hyson here in about 5 minutes. Hey, Michael, if you want to take some phone calls maybe after we talk for a little bit more, maybe we'll open the phone lines and see if anybody else wants to jump in. Okay, we'll see if we do that down the road here. But in the meantime, let's play another song here from Andrew Ryan. This one is called City Lights, and it's a relatively short one. So I might play another one called Marigolds right after that. We're going to hear City Lights and Marigolds. We'll have about 4 minutes. You can go out there and grab a beer or a glass of water or have a smoke or do whatever you do while you're taking a break here. And then we'll come back and have another conversation or continue our conversation with Dr. Michael Hyson here on KOPN Columbia 89.5 FM. This is Radio Orbit.
I know that I need a different way to talk to you. You're like the city lights, just like the city lights. That do not comfort me. They toss and they turn all throughout the night. But when you're 25 and you can't decide, you're like the city lights, just like the city lights. I'll go away. Yeah, I'll go away. Just go away. But when you're 25 and you can't decide, you're like the city lights, just like the city lights. You're like the city lights, just like the city lights, just like the light. Like a song until my voice breaks. Held you like a miracle. It took all I could take. Such a long time ago. Such a long time ago. Yeah, maybe I lost my mind. I'm just trying to find you. Yeah, maybe I lost control. That was never the issue. Such a long time ago. Such a long time ago. Such a long time. until my voice breaks. Held you like a miracle, but took all I could take.
All right. Once again, that's Andrew Ryan. You listen to it here on KOPN Columbia, 89.5 FM, just a few minutes after 1 a.m. on October the 23rd, Tuesday morning now. The songs you're hearing tonight come from a record called Across Currents, released in September or October, I guess, of 2017. And you can find out more about our musical guest or musical artist of the evening at Andrew Ryan, R-Y-A-N, AndrewRyan.net. All right, and for me, Mike Hagan, MikeHagan.com. You can connect with all the stuff that we're doing as well. You know, I didn't do any news today because I got too hung up playing Timothy Leary stuff and getting ready to have Dr. Michael Tyson here. Michael Tyson. Hey, Mike, you hear that? I just called you Mike Tyson.
Yes.
Anyway, Dr. Michael Hyson with me, and I really didn't do any news, even though there were a couple stories in the news, Michael, that I wanted to mention to you. One that I saw a couple months ago that was about a beluga whale that had gotten lost and was living with another species of dolphin and adopted their language. I'll just read a clip to you here, but this is from Science Alert, and this is how it starts. A captive beluga whale has done something amazing. She's seemingly learned another language and adopted it over for her own. The whale, then 4 years old, started making whistling sounds unique to dolphins and dropping her own beluga vocalizations after being housed with bottlenose dolphins for only 2 months. Before being moved to the Dolphinarium Koktebel in Crimea in 2013, the whale in question was well socialized with other beluga whales in her previous facility. But after the move to Koktebel, her new companions were only bottlenose dolphins. Initially, things were awkward. The first appearance of the beluga in the Dolphinarium caused a fright in the dolphins. Thankfully, it wasn't long before she settled in and started copying their language. In turn, they became friends. Ha!
All right. Wonderful.
Stunning, right? But right along the lines of what we've been talking about. And
yes.
And when we were at break there, I made a couple notes, and I'd like to mention them to you and let you elaborate a little bit.
Sure.
Earlier you mentioned these sort of rogue dolphins. I'm not sure that might not be the best description, but dolphins
solitary,
are sort of...
we call them.
What do you call them?
Solitary.
Yeah,
solitary.
Okay, so solitary dolphins that seem to be interested in interacting with humans. Then we have this weird thing that just happened with your echolocation experiment, where I guess it's a stretch, and I know that there are some steps in between, but it seems like there could be an effort being made to communicate there. The last thing that I was thinking is that these solitary dolphins perhaps could be almost like ambassadors or something like that.
Yes, actually, I do call them. I usually think of them as ambassadors. Yes.
Okay, but yeah. So
who knows? They may be anthropologists sent to study us.
It may be true. Let's talk a little bit about evolution. How long have the dolphins and whales been on the planet, and perhaps in the current form that they're in, as far as the size and the.
It starts with what they call the four-legged Proto-Ceti at about 70 million years ago. And then the usual thought is that something like they developed into something like hippopotamuses and became more and more aquatic. But definitely by something like 20 million to 13 million years ago, they have brains larger than ours, full-fledged baleen feeding for the filter feeders, and large brains and everything for the toothed ones, like sperm whales and so on. So they've been around, say, a good 20 million years in their current form, more or less.
Wow. So compared to us, it's been about 150, maybe 200,000 years.
For anything that was called Cro-Magnon, that's 100,000, 200,000.
Right.
For anything that was called genus Homo, that you can stretch it to about 5 million, at least according to the current data.
Okay. All right. But still,
there's, of course, some rogue archaeology that says that it's a lot longer, but the standard number is about that. 5 million per Homo habilis, that sort of thing. So yeah, they have about 4 times their evolutionary history.
Okay. Before we go any further, there's one other note that I wanted to ask you about. I had read that that dolphins use, and whales, have a unique whistle or click or something for each individual. So almost like a name, perhaps, or something like that?
Yes. They've been known since about 1945 with the Caldwells at St. Augustine, and they ended up being called signature whistles. And there's been a whole raft of papers on that.
Wow.
But yes, it does look like they have individual names.
Signature whistles.
Yeah.
Incredible. And play. I know it's another thing that we associate with very high intelligence, right?
Right. They play all the time. They touch and make love a lot too. So it turns out, since they never sleep, and they're making love about 25% of the time. I mean, it's about 6 hours a day.
Wow. And I think there have even been some examples of at least some sort of affection shown between humans and dolphins, right?
Yes, there's several affairs in the literature.
I'll be darned. Yeah, we got our X rating going now with dolphins and humans at 1:15 in the morning. So, very interesting.
Well,
okay,
this may be a good place to bring up. First of all, I sent you a link to a video that I did of a talk, or a video of a talk I did last October 6th. And I'd like to offer that if somebody would like to send, say, $10 or whatever to my PayPal, I would send them the Dropbox link, and they can see the talk.
Yeah, in fact, what I'll do is I'll put something on the website on mine as well that points to yours, and then and if people are interested, they can take a look at it, Michael. Yeah,
and so my PayPal is attached to Michael Hyson at yahoo.com. Our major website is called planetpuna.com.
And it's a good way to spend $10 or $20 because Michael's been in a world of trouble, frankly, for the last few months because of what actually happened with the volcanoes. We haven't talked too seriously about it because I didn't want to get that deeply into it because it's personal. But but if you look at the stories, you'll see the name Puna all over the place with regard to the volcanic activity in the last few months, and that's where Mike lives. So. Anyway, so anything to help him would obviously be appreciated. So
very great. And then, of course, the phenomenon, the echolocation phenomenon, that you should download that and read it. Just to back up a little bit, yes, indeed, we think that ultimately what we may be able to show is the dolphins are making what do we call sonoacoustic shapes in the water and using those as part of their communication. And there's a lot of steps. There's a lot of steps to actually demonstrate that.
Right.
But that's our direction.
Right. So for me, as sort of a layman, looking at all this stuff with a real high altitude view, if I'm looking back all the way back to Lily and all this stuff, right? I'm thinking that there's perhaps an effort on both sides of the equation to resolve the communication gap or to bridge the communication gap. To me, clearly, obviously, the human side is a no-brainer. We know we've been trying to learn and to figure out what's going on with these other creatures, but to me, it seems like they may also be trying as well. And
well, that was one of the reasons Lily was so encouraged because it turns out, we've got like 1/10 their hearing range. And when the dolphins were trying to communicate with us, they shoved their frequencies as low as they could go. And then they slowed everything down. They did everything they could to match us. And since they were already 10 times higher in frequency and speed, that was quite a stretch. So that's what he's saying. Yes, indeed, they're trying their best to communicate and going to a lot of effort to do that.
Just as a sort of just came to my mind, has there ever been any sort of mathematical analysis done to like the clicks and whistles and sounds to look for any sort of patterns or anything like that?
Oh, well, I'm not sure about mathematical exactly, but similar. Yeah, John Craker's looking into it. He's got a thing called a resonant spectrogram, which has got 1,000 times better than the sonogram in resolution in terms of space and time. And so we're learning a lot looking at their sounds that way. the thing that comes to mind most is Markov and Ostrokaya that looked at 300,000 vocalizations and found out that some of them were considered syntactic units, so roughly words. And these things were consistent, like 3 clicks and a whistle, or 3 whistles and a click. All sorts of combinations like that, up to 4 clicks, 4 whistles, or any combination thereof. And they decided that they followed the rules of language called Zipf's laws, and therefore they do have a language, and it has on the order of 1 trillion words possible.
Wow!
So that's about the closest I get to your mathematical analysis.
Okay.
Let's see. But back to my talk a little bit. The reason you brought up the closeness of humans and dolphins, one of the punchlines of the talk is that I found work by a guy named Busby and several others at Texas A&M, in which they looked at the chromosome mapping of dolphin chromosomes and human chromosomes and compared them. And what they found was that the dolphin genome is closer to the human genome than any other creature. It's closer than, say, chimps, closer than bonobo. So dolphins are the closest genetic relative of the humans. Now, how that has occurred is a good question. I'm just reporting that's what they found. Now, according to E.O. Wilson and people that study what's called sociobiology, the altruistic behavior is generally shown to those that have the most genetic similarity. And you can work that out for ant colonies and things like that. It works out with mathematical precision. But so that suggests that since dolphins and whales and humans are closely related genetically, that there therefore will be a lot of altruistic behavior between us. There'll also be presumably an attraction to be with one another because we're so similar. So I think that's what's at the basis of our dolphin-human connection.
Well, it's amazing, and that makes me think about the aquatic ape theory.
Oh yes, very much.
We've got about 10 minutes before the bottom of the hour, and let's riff on that for a little bit. And for people who are totally unfamiliar, tell from the beginning, because it's a completely different angle on evolutionary biology. So
in evolutionary biology, there's several major problems which they have different solutions to. But one is loss of hair. Next one is bipedal motion, and third is big brains. So let's just pick those for a moment. It turns out that walking upright is a problem, and how that develops. And usually they say, well, we learned how to make spears and knives and bows and arrows and things like that. And we ran around on the savannah killing animals, and that's why we became bipedal. But it was Alistair Hardy and a lady named Elaine Morgan that popularized a thing called the aquatic ape theory. And the idea there was that you could explain the loss of hair because if you were swimming a lot, just like whales and dolphins have lost their hair, humans had lost their hair, that the bipedal walking on 2 feet would arise if you were gathering shellfish and stuff while wading in water. So that would be a transition step to get to be bipedal. And then finally, the oils and proper food and all that you get from harvesting seafood and clams and all this stuff would improve the quality of the brain and lead to its increase in size. Okay. So that's a quick thing. Then you can go to other things like we have subcutaneous fat. In the whale world, they call it blubber. And it turns out, if you starve a chimpanzee, they do store some fat, but it's around their organs, not under their skin. And when you starve them, they'll eat that fat. But if you starve a human, they will preserve the fat and eat protein first. So you'll actually waste your muscles and turn them into sugar before you let your fat reserves go. Interesting. Which is what you'd expect of a marine mammal who's trying to preserve its insulation. So there's a number of correlative things like that about how we could be aquatic. So it's called the aquatic ape theory. And then the The counter theory, the usual one, is called the savanna theory. But it turns out we were supposed to be running across plains of grass. But the paleoclimate guys found out that we're actually living in forests along the sides of rivers. So it blew the whole savanna theory apart. And there's nothing to replace it right now.
When did that happen? That was pretty quiet.
Over the last 20 years or so. And they got better at paleobotany and ancient pollen and all that other stuff.
What did they find?
That instead of being out on dry grassland, we were living near water, near rivers and streams.
Still in the forest.
Near forests. Yeah.
Interesting.
So there's no way they can demonstrate that we're evolving by running across the plains hunting animals.
Interesting.
And so I had this joke way of putting it. It says, hey, we're going to have some vacation in a month or so. Why don't we break out the spears and go run around in the savannah hunting animals in the hot sun? And everybody says, nah, let's go to the beach.
Yeah. You know, something else, Michael, that sort of comes to my mind now. This book that I've got, there's a section in here that has a little bit about like the skeletal structure,
Yes.
And I'm sure you know this, but I did not know that the front flippers, actually the bone structure inside is like fingers.
Yes.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So, and for the people to try to give you a visual description of this, if you're looking at a dolphin, the two flippers that they kind of wave around like their little arms.
Call them pectoral fins.
Yeah,
on the front.
Just a little below the eyes and a little bit behind the eyes there. Just on the lower, just below their blowhole. Those, if you actually look at an X-ray of those, you'll see that they're not like one solid piece of like cartilage, but there's 3 or 4 actual like finger type bones in there.
Yeah, there's a
unbelievable.
thumb and 4 fingers. There's a thumb and 4 fingers in there. Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
there's a lot to this. I think humans and see where to start. It turns out that dolphins are able to heal things with their sonar and their electrics. And it's a long discussion, but I experienced my neck being healed by a dolphin named Dreamer. So I know it's real. There's a list of about 400 to 500 conditions that seem to improve with dolphin, what they call dolphin-assisted therapy. There are people who dispute this, of course, and I admit that most of this is called anecdotal data. But as Jack Kaslowitz likes to point out, the plural of anecdote is data.
Yeah.
But in any case, there's a history of dolphins healing people. So there was a guy named Tchaikovsky in Russia and Michel Ledant in France who started birthing babies underwater. And it was remarkable that humans do better at delivering babies underwater than they do on land. And that the babies come out easier. It seems to be beneficial for the baby and the mom. And the babies birthed this way and raised around water develop 6 months faster over their first 2 years. They might have 150 grams extra brain weight. They seem to walk sooner, talk sooner, have strong immune systems, and swim really well.
It seems like the woman's environment, the environment of the womb, is essentially a water environment or something like that. So it seems like it would be a very natural way to give birth into an environment that was very similar to the one that you were in to begin with.
Yes, it does seem that way. And so that was one of the things that most interested Star, that we wanted babies born in the water with dolphins present during their labor and delivery. That was the goal.
Yeah.
We tried that for years, except 25 babies in a row came at night. There was no way to get the dolphins and the babies together. So she changed the program to what she called pre-birth dolphin contact. And the first one was her second son, John Kahena, was born on Kahena Beach with 300 dolphins waiting. And we would have delivered him with the dolphins, except he decided to come out 1 foot first. So we did a breech footling delivery on Kahena Beach, about 40 miles from a hospital. And everything worked out fine.
That's Star's son, right?
Yeah, that's Star's son, yeah. Star's second son.
Do you mind me asking if he's doing okay? He's still around with us now?
Yeah, he's doing fine. He's ended up in London, and he's an artist and a musician and puts together major shows. And
All right.
His brother Ariel, or Tiger, just got back from a trip to see him. She went to London and Ireland and Paris and back to the U.S. Tiger's in New Hampshire right now with a 12-year-old daughter named Violet.
All right, well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I'm catching you up on family history. But Star's birth experience inspired her to get other parents in the water with dolphins while they were pregnant. And she hunted the first 25 of them. And of those 25, at least 4 of them were making clicks and whistles as some of their first sounds. And 2 of those are telepathic with each other and their moms very strongly. And one of them, Naya, is able to be like 10 miles away from the beaches. And she will say to her mom something like, "Hey, Mom, the dolphins just got the whole let's go swimming." And in those cases where she can confirm it, her child's always correct.
Amazing.
There's some sort of connection by which she knows where the dolphins are. So we think that is remarkable. And Kim Nelly and others are continuing the work. I think we're up to about 200 such babies at the moment.
I know there have been some remarkable results with dolphins and like autistic children.
Oh yes, definitely.
Maybe
Dolphins, autistic, cerebral palsy. Yeah.
So what do you think? And I'm just asking your opinion. I'm not holding you to the fire. I'm not asking you about a scientific study. But what's your gut tell you that's going on? Is it some sort of a mental connection, or do you think it's electromagnetic in the way that they're able to do the piezoelectric thing?
It could be anything. It could be anything. But if you want my gut level opinion,
yeah, I'm just interested in your opinion.
There's a lady named Patricia St. John and wrote a book called The Secret Language of the Dolphins. And what she concluded, and I think she's right, is that she was able, by learning to be in contact with the dolphins, to be in telepathic contact with the autistic children. And once she was able to make that kind of contact, they got better. What we do know is that autistic kids brought to the dolphins, their attention span goes up, they become more cooperative, they can become more focused on the real world, if you will. And in many cases, or not many cases, but in some cases, they come out after the dolphin encounter, they'll say, for example, their first words. So something profound is happening. And we need to do more study, of course. But I have a feeling the telepathy is important. The trouble with that is standard science rejects telepathy. So I'm a neurobiologist, but if I went to a neurobiology conference and started talking telepathy, they would probably throw me out.
Right. Well, you got to get somewhere with Rupert Sheldrake, and maybe we get him involved somehow, right? Yes,
indeed. Rupert is cool.
Yeah.
I like Rupert.
Yeah, he's something else. All right, Michael, I think that's a good chance to take a break here. So let's take a break for about 4 minutes or so, and then we'll come back, and we've got about 25 minutes or so left. I'd like to talk a little bit about space travel and how that might actually fit into this puzzle, and really anything else you'd like to talk about for the end of the program here. Yeah. Maybe we'll open the phone lines and see if anybody wants to call us and say hi or whatever, okay?
Okay.
All right, everybody, that is my friend, Dr. Michael Hyson, marine biologist, neurobiologist, and just an all-around incredible guy, and I'm so thrilled to have him on the air with us tonight, and we'll be back with him in just a few minutes. In the meantime, we will hear another one from Andrew Ryan. This one is called Gwyneth, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. It's Mike Hagan, Radio Orbit, KOPN Columbia.
home. Just in time before you're grown. Gwyneth don't mind, she's alone all the time. She's mesmerized, how the stars intertwine. And I know life's always changing. Just so you know, you're never alone. No, you're never alone. To tell the truth, I feel more like a stranger every time that I come home. As I get lost deep in thought, as I cross these currents to your heart. Gwyneth don't mind, she's alone all the time. She's mesmerized, how the stars intertwine. And I know life's always changing. Just so you know, you're never alone. No, you're never alone. As I get lost deep in thought, as I cross these currents to your heart.
All right, that's called Gwyneth. Once again, Andrew Ryan from his record Across Currents. You can find him on Spotify and Bandcamp, and just do a little web search if you're interested in the music. And after tonight, sometime tomorrow, I'll get this program uploaded, and if you go to the music page, you'll be able to connect with Andrew Ryan from the music link on my website, MikeHagan.com, as well as my guest, Dr. Michael Hyson. You can find him on the web at Planet Puna, PlanetPuna. That's planetpuna.com. And without further delay, we'll say hello again. Hi, Dr. Hyson.
Hello.
Aloha to you as well. All right, we got 25 minutes left. It's 1:30 in the morning here, about 1:35. What is it, 7:30? No, in about 8:30, 9:30? What is it?
8:36 I got here.
8:36 in Puna, Hawaii. Well, I sure appreciate you spending the time with me, Michael, and it's been a thrill to have you back on the air. And we're going to get back to our regular routine. Every few months, we'll do a radio program. Okay?
Oh, good. Oh, good. Thrilling for me too.
Yeah,
like old times.
It really is. It really is. Okay, so I told all of my listeners, as I've been advertising this program during the course of the week, that one of the things we were going to talk about is space travel, and everyone was kind of like, "Well, what do you mean? What's that have to do with dolphins?" And I said, "Well, first of all, the guy that I'm talking to used to work for NASA, and he worked for Bell Labs and a bunch of other people, Caltech, and so." clearly you have some understanding of space travel from your background, but how does that tie in with cetacea and dolphins and whales and that type of thing?
Well, let's see. Just to start off, when I was a child, I was very interested in the space program. I was watching Cousteau inhabit the continental shelf with divers.
Right.
The Apollo flights were going. I happened to be living with dolphins in Texas. So I thought my future was assured. We're on our way to the stars, and the dolphins are already part of it, and Cousteau's colonizing the ocean. So everything's going to be fine.
Right.
And then right after the moon landing, all those nice projects went away. Lily was gone and so on. But anyway, I was left with a great desire and understanding that humans should be a spacefaring species. It's important. Like Heinlein said, Earth is too fragile a basket for humanity to leave all its eggs in. Something could happen to the Earth. We should have some sort of human settlement elsewhere. So I thought that was very important, and was always interested in space travel and everything else. So anyway, later I was at Caltech and needed some work, and got some work consulting at Jet Propulsion Labs on a thing called the electrostatic levitator, and got to fly zero-G parabolas to test it. So it was a lot of fun. And in the process, I met people like Roland Gillespie, who came up with the Saturn V engine and figured out spin instability and the three-body problem, and also proposed the first single-stage orbit rocket, and so on. So I got interested in all that. And when the Challenger blew up, I was just wondering whether NASA knew what it was doing anymore. And about that time, I'd run into a fellow named Harry Hudson, who knew how to make private, cheap rockets, which was like an oxymoron at the time. So I went to work with him in about 1980. I was part of the team that blew up the first private rocket in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, really. Yeah, it was called the Percheron. And we made NBC Nightline.
That's awesome.
And our nose cone blew to 400 feet. We got what in the NASA vernacular is a hard start. Yeah. The NASA guys came by and looked at all our stuff and said, "You're doing good, kids. Just keep going. We've all blown up some of it."
Michael, you'll get a kick out of this. My day job, I work in a lab as a quality control sort of engineer, and I do a lot of I do a lot of destructive testing, and we basically see how much something can actually take before it breaks, and when it does break, sometimes it's in fantastic fashion, and
right.
And we call it rapid disassembly.
I gotcha. Well, that's what rockets do. They definitely disassemble.
Right.
Yeah.
So when was that? That was like 1980 or something?
That was about 1980. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
So when that happened, our investors went away for about 10 years. And I ended up at Jet Propulsion Labs for about 9 years.
Okay.
Working with the what they call the containerless processing group. What can you do with drops and bubbles in orbit without gravity? Can you come up with unique industrial processes, that sort of thing? So we came up with a number of things, but the main thing I worked on was called the electrostatic levitator. People can find that on the website. If you go to planetpuna.com, put a /HYSON, it'll take you to my profile, and you can find it there. But we were able to hold a centimeter-sized droplet for 30 seconds in a zero-G parabola in the KC-135 parabola plane, or weightless. They called it the Weightless Wonder 4. And I got to do that about every 3 months for about 9 years.
Wow.
It was wonderful. And I love zero-G. So that got me inspired. But then at some point I decided to leave JPL. And that's about the time that Gary Hudson had started another company called Pacific American Launch Systems. And we were designing a thing called the Phoenix vehicle that was single-staged orbit. It didn't drop anything. You just put gas in it and go. And it looked like it was going to launch for at least $500 a pound, and maybe as low as $5 a pound.
Wow.
And so I was very enamored of that. And we almost got test fire out of one of our articles, but we ran out of money before that happened. So, that was my foray. So I was research director to 2 private rocket companies. And so that got me inspired about space.
Okay.
Now, how does this relate to dolphins? The closest relationship is when John Lilly started his communication work with the dolphins, Frank Drake of the Drake equation
Sure.
for SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence.
Yeah, for people unfamiliar, quickly, the Drake equation, I mean, just real quick, Mike, just the headline, right?
Yeah. It's just like how many stars are there? How many of those stars have planets? How many of the stars that have planets develop life? How many of those guys develop intelligent life?
Right.
How many of those guys survive to where they have, say, radio? And it's just a framework you can put all your guesses in, but it's been called the Drake equation.
Mm-hmm.
And it was considered, seminal in this whole thing. So before they sent out the first, or did the first listening test called Project Ozma out of Greenbelt, they had a meeting, and they invited John Lilly there, and Carl Sagan was there, Drake, and I forget a number of other people that are luminary. And they decided that those who had tried to communicate with an alien species, they called themselves the Order of the Dolphins. So that's how Sagan and Lilly got together, and how Lilly influenced the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Wow. Because
one of Lilly's arguments was that we should get good at doing this before we ran into other aliens other than the ones we already had on this planet. So that's one branch. And the other branch comes about because we called comes about and is why we called the effort that we've done, Star and I, called the Sirius Institute. And it goes back to the story of the Dogon, among other things.
Yeah, they're an African tribe, yeah?
Right. So there's an astronomer named Robert Temple who wrote a book called The Sirius Mystery.
Yeah.
And
is Robert still alive, Michael?
I believe so.
Okay.
I've tried to get in touch with him, haven't managed to do it yet.
Okay.
I think he's still with us.
All right.
But Star and I did have dinner with him in London. And he's a marvelous guy. He was more brilliant than I expected. And I expected a lot. Anyway, he puts together the mythology. And it looks like native cultures like the Dogon, the Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, and others knew that Sirius was a binary star. And it had a white dwarf companion that was very heavy. Now, how this is done without telescopes is a good question.
Right, it wasn't discovered in modern days until when?
Bessel saw it wiggle in 1884.
Okay. And
we didn't get a good picture of it until 1973.
Okay.
So it was tough even for us. Briefly, if you ask the Dogon, for example, what happened, they say that these aquatic beings from Sirius, they call the Nomo, showed up, made a pond in the nearby their rocket, and this guy they called the King of the Waters shows up and teaches them the arts of civilization. And this is arguably the best evidence for ancient astronauts that we've ever run into.
Interesting.
And so we ended up calling it Sirius Institute because of that. And if you torque the myth a little bit, like the Dogon said they were amphibious, and maybe they weren't exactly dolphins, but of all the things I can think of that they could be, dolphins is a pretty good guess. So maybe the dolphins got involved.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So that led to the speculation that when a major disaster happens on this Earth and the humans are almost wiped out, then how does civilization get restarted? So it's my speculation that people go to the shore and the dolphins show up having remembered everything and start teaching us again.
Well, I think, again, something that we take for granted that we really haven't talked about tonight is the amount of water compared to the amount of land. I mean, the dolphins and the whales inhabit and pretty much rule over, two-thirds of the planet. And,
at least 72% is water.
Right.
Yep.
We only live on the surface, so we're essentially two-dimensional creatures, and they're three-dimensional creatures. Not only do they have that amount of area, but they also have the depth that's involved. So it's a huge amount of space that they inhabit, and they pretty much, I won't say dominate. That's not the word I want to use, but have dominion over. Perhaps.
That's right. They should be the ones ruling the planet. As far as I know, maybe they are.
Perhaps
Maybe
they
they're
are.
inserting ideas into us.
Dennis McKenna always says the monkeys only think they're running the show.
That's a good line. That's great. Well, just very quickly though, on the serious issues, the Dogon, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Native Americans, others have the same story. It's global, and so I think that's important. And the next punchline of that is the Earth, or the solar system. Our sun is a binary. We think the only explanation of precession that makes sense is that the solar system is orbiting something else. And the most likely thing that it's orbiting is Sirius.
Yeah.
So I could be wrong, but my conclusion so far is that the sun is a binary and Sirius is the binary companion that we are co-orbiting.
There's some pretty convincing evidence of that, too. There's a guy named Walter Cruttenden that wrote a book.
That's the one, yes.
Yeah.
Walter Cruttenden,
Yeah, and that's definitely worth people's investigation.
Absolutely.
In fact,
right
and it's really not any kind of a conspiracy theory. I mean, in fact, most stars, it turns out, are either binary or trinary stars. So if you're
at least 50%.
Yeah, so if you're a singular star, you're almost in the minority. So, and that may, as a side note here, that may have to do with the wobble and everything that people talk about that has to do with precession. So
right. But here's the punchline: there is that the rest of the sky precesses. The only star out there that does not show precession is Sirius.
Very.
The only reason it wouldn't show precession is because we're orbiting.
That's right. Okay. Very
That's kind of how because of the Dogon and the Nomo amphibians that came to see us and things like that. That's why we think it connects to space travel. And but just to say very quickly, I've been working with Elizabeth. I worked with a guy named Nassim Haramein for about 9 years.
I was going to ask
how
Nassim's
figure out something
doing.
Better than they're back in Santa Clara, I think it is, or San Clemente, something like that. And I'm haven't been in touch with them much, so I don't know. They seem to be doing okay.
Is the Resonance Project still a thing and all that?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right.
And I think it's a long discussion. I think Nassim has some good ideas. I would probably present them differently myself, but it got me going, and it was the reason I met Elizabeth Rauscher.
Absolutely,
so that's all to the good.
Good.
So Elizabeth and I are still working on things, and I just wanted to mention things like the Nasicus thruster by Paul LaViolette, with a Greek guy named Nasicus.
Oh, yeah.
Who's got a niobium coil and a permanent magnet that makes a thrust. And they say if you scale it, if it scales, you can have trip times to the moon in hours and Mars in days. And I hope that's true, because we need something better than rockets if we're going to colonize the solar system and the rest of the galaxy.
Yeah, the propulsion problem has to be solved for sure.
Yeah. So I've looked into that. I've looked a lot into Thomas Townsend Brown's electrogravity, the Nasicus thruster. I've looked at a whole bunch of different
What about
things.
Cyril?
I've tried to look at it. I can't, because I just can't quite wrap my arms about what's going on. It may indeed work.
Pardon me. I know. Dr. Paul is impressed with Dr. Cyril's work, but again, I don't know enough about it to say one way or the other. I'm like you. I just want to see one of them.
Right. So I was hoping when I was working with Elizabeth and Nassim and so on, my fantasy was we'd have a hovering craft out the door in 2 years, but we tried.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how the solar system and space travel and everything gets balled up into the dolphin world.
Okay.
Partly out of personal interest. My personal fantasy would be fun to take the dolphins back to Sirius to see their home planet. That's total speculation. Of course.
I'll try to get a ticket next to you there if I could, please.
Yeah.
We'll just do a live radio show from Sirius B.
Right. And then there's a quick thing. The last utterance in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is actually called the Book of Coming Forth into Day. The last utterance says something like, I now ascend to the realm of the starry gods, and they understand my speech because I am speaking the language of the star Sirius. So Sirius was very important. I'm just trying to sort out all these mysteries. They're mysteries.
They are, and they're real mysteries,
Right. And then let's see. My kitchen sink version of this talk would be called The Dolphinization of the Planet, The Humanization of Space, and The Re-Enchantment of the Earth. The dolphinization is we become partners with the dolphins again. Mm-hmm. Humanization, of course, is going into the space.
Right.
And the re-enchantment has to do with Elizabeth and other people like Dean Radin. Things like remote viewing, telepathy, psychokinesis, all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
They used to be called magic. Now they're part of standard non-local quantum physics. Now we have re-enchanted the Earth because these so-called paranormal phenomena are quite real, in my opinion, and are very much like magic. See,
yeah,
so we are re-enchanting the Earth by bringing back what used to be called magic.
The question is, who can get a rope around it? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's
it's a big rope.
Yeah, but it's certainly our a goal. I mean, clearly we've got a lot of issues here on the planet that need to be resolved, and they're not going to be resolved through political discourse. Clearly, at this point, they're not going to be resolved through preaching on the Mount. So we're going to need something, to.
They'll be solved by having a better energy source or propulsion that's beyond the rocket, and so on.
Hey, Michael, this sort of just came to me, but and it's completely up to you. But believe it or not, the person who does the 2 to 5:30 spot here at the radio station is they quit a while back. And I actually have to stay on the air, believe it or not, until 5:30 this morning. And I was just going to play some music after you and I got off the air. But if I open the phone lines here and people start to call, if we get some phone calls, maybe you'd like to stick around just for a little bit longer, maybe?
Sure. I'm up for that.
All right, because it's
anything that we should cover before we go?
And anything you'd like to say, certainly,
Yeah, please write Mike Hagan or Michael Hyson at yahoo.com and possibly send some funding to PayPal, also attached to Michael Hyson at yahoo.com, and I'll send you the video of our talk, or my talk, called The Dolphin-Human Connection. And let's see, I'd just like to make a general tribute to the dolphins and whales and John Lilly and Truby and especially Star Newland and Rosemary Devine and Tiger and just a myriad of wonderful, wonderful folks that I have had the great time of running into and working with and being friends with. It's been pretty magical.
Absolutely, Michael. Here's to every one of them.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, hang in there, buddy.
So
okay.
Come back.
Yeah, we'll be back in just a minute. Okay. All right, everybody. How about that? Dr. Michael Hyson, what a man. And we're going to come back to him in just a few minutes. I'm going to play another song here by Andrew Ryan, probably the last one we're going to get in tonight, and then we'll switch to some new stuff after the top of the hour. However, because I am going to be here for another 3.5 hours, you're welcome to give us a call. The number is 573-443-8255. I know it's late, and we've been talking for a long time, but if you've been sticking around and listened to our conversation for the last 2 hours, maybe you've got a question for Dr. Hyson, and now's your chance to do it. So once again, 573-443-8255. Call me, and we'll get you on the air here after we play this song by Andrew Ryan, okay? Once again, this is off a record that's called Across Currents, and this one is called Town and Country. Once again, thanks to my great friend Michael Hyson for doing the program tonight. We will get back with him in a few minutes. I'm not sure how long we'll have him with us, so we'll kind of make the formal ending of the program right now, but we'll be back with Dr. Hyson in just a few minutes. And like I said, 443-8255 if you'd like to get on the air and have a chat with us, all right? It's Mike. You're listening to Radio Orbit on KOPN Columbia 89.5 FM.